Hello, Gamecock fans. I'm Spencer Ball.
And I'm JP Barry. Welcome to Ball Don't Lie, SGTV's premier live sports show.
JP and I will be giving you our weekly insight every Sunday.
This week on the show, upsets across college football should make for some exciting matchups next weekend.
And later, a Carolina Hurricanes preview and an update on the MLB playoffs so far.
Be sure to stick around for head-to-head football pick'ems.
And without further ado, welcome to Ball Don't Lie.
Welcome to the Kennedy Greenhouse Studio.
I'm Spencer Ball.
And I'm JP Barry.
This is the one where there's a right answer and there's a wrong answer.
I'm always the get-back game guy.
There's so many teams with so many good wins.
Because, they love seeing Clemson lose no matter what.
Well, I think there's a lot of people that love seeing Clemson lose.
Yeah,
Return of the King released 20 years ago today.
There you go.
And for that reason, give me the Noles.
I like being right more than I like being happy.
I think the committee made the right choice.
Florida State did not lose a football game. It's football. This is college football.
How can you not be romantic about baseball? It's just such a tremendous sport.
It's
But
time.
man,
Is it time?
I think it's time.
This is Ball Don't Lie.
Well, the Gamecocks did play a football game yesterday. Unfortunately, both myself and JP and our lovely producer Tyler were all in attendance. And really, we could just leave the segment right there and move on. But it was one of the worst things I've ever been witness to, JP.
I mean, it was awful. It was just the least fun I think I've had at a sporting event in quite some time. 125 yards at half. I mean, the most fun parts were the chants regarding Juice Wells.
Again, and Dylan Stewart.
Dylan Stewart did the funniest thing I think I've ever seen in my entire life on Saturday. I'm not sure if we can even really,
Are we allowed to recreate this?
we can maybe recreate it. I'm not sure if we can relay it.
Yeah, we won't say it, but let's pretend the table here is Jackson Dart and
Yeah.
Dylan Stewart went, he
Exactly.
did a little. And then later in the game,
He shot
he
Kyle
went
Kennard.
bam with the finger guns, just spinning around in a circle. That was pretty cool.
Kyle Kennard was like, I was like, what are you guys doing?
Meanwhile, they're down, 20, 21
It's
or
not their-
24 points at this point.
It's also not really their fault because the defense or the offense was just so terrible. So it was
Yeah, so and now moving actually to the game, you start with a 3-and-out. A great start. Crowd was rocking. You force a 3-and-out on an incompletion to it was targeted to Juice Wells. That just ignites the crowd. You can't move the ball on offense, 4th and 1, instead of just going for it, which I think people could have respected. If you go for it on 4th and 1, normally you run a real offensive play, fine. They run a snap to the up back, not
apparently
even
they fumbled.
creatively. Yeah, it was really ugly. We couldn't see it, but Ole Miss all over it. You give your defense now only 30 yards to work with, no rest. It was horrible. It was just from the gates, the play calling, abysmal.
it was not worth our time. So I think we're just going to move on.
No, I told JP as we were leaving the game before halftime that I hope every single fan in the stadium left with it because that's the kind of performance the team put on. I mean, really just not good enough. Not good enough at all.
But, though it wasn't the one we expected, an SEC underdog came up victorious this weekend, and we'll kind of be seeing the ramifications of that. We'll talk about it a lot more later, of course, with Alabama and Vanderbilt. But the Gamecocks play the Crimson Tide this weekend, and Spencer, I'm not very excited for this one.
No, I don't think this one is going to bode well for South Carolina, especially after the performance we just saw from them. I think there are things that South Carolina can definitely learn from this past game because, again, the team has shown us flashes that they can be a good team, at least defensively. I think they played okay enough. It's hard to blame them when you only score 3 points. That's just not going to do it. But against Alabama, they pose a whole new level of threats with Jalen Milroe's dual threat abilities, and Ryan Williams is one of the best receivers in college football. So, again, I think it's going to be really hard for South Carolina to go on the road to Tuscaloosa to an Alabama team that's probably pretty angry.
It's a stupid football team. They commit stupid penalties. They're just not consistent. They're not fundamentally sound. They've allowed the most sacks and tackles for loss in college football. The play calling is uninspired. The performance of the offense is uninspired. They're leaving their defense out to dry for the vast majority of the game, and I mean, it's just not.
You can't move the ball downfield in 2024 It's not great when your offense can't stretch vertically at all. It seems every single play South Carolina brings a man or multiple people in motion or across the formation. They do so much pre-snap stuff that equates to nothing, and they don't use them. They'll run a guy where you could maybe have a jet sweep option. They never gave it to the jet. It seemed like every read option or play which you could do one thing, they chose the other option that was always worse. Never making the right reads. It just it didn't go well at all, and it got out of hand really quick. And Ole Miss is a good football team. Alabama's a better football team.
Yeah,
it's going to
Carolina
be really hard for them to go on the road and get a big win.
Yeah, and South Carolina plays a million ranked teams the rest of the way, so things could get real very quickly.
It could. Again, not to say that this team can't make a bowl game, because again, we'll talk about it in our next segment, but I mean, Mizzou showed us they might not be as good as people were expecting. There's a lot of parity this year, kind of shades of 2007 for all the college football historians out there when you saw South Florida in
number
the top
2,
10.
South
Boston
Carolina was number
College,
2.
South Carolina up in the polls. There's just pure chaos everywhere. And that's what we're going to talk about now, because Bama wasn't the only ranked team that fell this week. There were dozens of upsets across college football's biggest stages. And, after leaving Williams-Brice, I think we found out that there were a lot of other good football games on. And
that were more worth our time.
A lot more worth our time, namely number 1 Alabama falling to the Vanderbilt Commodores, and I think this just made the whole nation smile.
It really did. I mean, it was a outstanding performance by Clark Lee and the Commodores, but I mean, every year in college football, there's a week where the slate looks a little underwhelming. There's not a big headline game, and it's like, it seems like a pretty easy week. And that's usually the week where we get our blood week, where chaos just flows through college football, and the little numbers by people's names don't seem to matter as much.
And they fall down the next week.
Yeah, and we saw that with Alabama losing to Vanderbilt, which was Vanderbilt's first win in this series since 1993. Spencer, they scored 13 points total against Nick Saban Alabama teams and scored 40 against the Crimson Tide on Saturday.
And watching the end of that game, it looked like Bama was learning nothing. You know what I mean? Vanderbilt was doing a lot similar concepts. They got Pavia on the move. They used, backs coming out of the backfield, tight ends slipping out. And it seemed like Alabama just couldn't get a read on it. But the same, I will say, it's a lot easier to maybe notice things from your couch and, try and relay that to a full team, in the midst of it. I'm sure it's much harder. But again, it felt like Vanderbilt just had a formula and Alabama just didn't change.
Well, it felt like one of the classic upsets of a Nick Saban Alabama, a slippery quarterback that's he's making plays off script or on the run, timely turnovers forced by the opponent's defense, and then some really stupid mistakes from Alabama, and it was fun. It was a really good time. Me and my roommate were watching, having a really really fun time. But I mean,
you got to be happy for the fans. I mean, awesome
absolutely.
Celebration.
Vanderbilt was 0-60 versus top 5 opponents all time before that. And Alabama was 64-2 against unranked opponents as the number 1 team. They similarly lost to an unranked squad in 2021 as the number 1 team, the Texas A&M Aggies. But this one was a little bit different.
And A&M, a lot more premier talent than I would say Vanderbilt. Not to say that Vanderbilt's a bad team. They've got a couple bad losses on the year to Georgia State and Missouri in games they maybe could have won. But again, I mean, this team's a lot more competent than, when you hear the name Vanderbilt, the teams you think of. I think this team is definitely different than that.
Yeah, and they carried the goalpost down Broadway. But,
awesome. And
we have 5 other games to get to.
Absolutely.
So we'll just go, we'll put that back up there and go through a couple more of the games. Namely, number 4, Tennessee falling in Fayetteville to Arkansas. Spencer, that was a really shocking performance, mostly because Tennessee, the Josh Heupel offense just never materialized. Normally they get those big plays. They were down 3-0 at halftime. We're up 14-3 in the third quarter, and then just really kind of put the game in park and thought they could just run it out and win.
Yeah, really surprising because I think the Tennessee rushing attack was there, especially, Sampson had a really good game on the ground, but, Tennessee was never able to really pull away. And, Arkansas at home and what they call Vietnam down there, man, they really laid out a trap for Tennessee, and they
he was Nico, I'm leaving the playing field on the final play when he ran out of bounds with 0 seconds left. And it was a stupid game by Tennessee, and they paid the price for it. And for Sam Pittman in Arkansas, what a win to bounce back. This year, Sam Pittman on the hot seat more so than maybe anyone else in college football. Some tough opening game. You lose in double overtime to Oklahoma State. You lose to your big rival, Texas A&M, barely.
You haven't beaten in seemingly forever.
You turn around and get the first top 5 win of your tenure there. They're for Arkansas's first top 5 win since they beat number 1 LSU in 2007, which we'll be saying a lot here. And then staying in the
love chaos. It's awesome.
Yeah,
it
hey, blood for the blood god, baby. But, moving on in the SEC, number 9 Mizzou got throttled. We picked Texas A&M, or I picked Texas A&M to win.
I did too.
At least. And I thought it would be close. It just was never. Mizzou had like 1 first down in the first half. A&M just put hands on them and sent them to the shadow realm.
Yeah, me and JP decided to put on the Guardians pitching rotation instead. We watched the Guardians just whoop the Tigers. A&M just trounced Mizzou in every aspect of the game. But it's
somehow Mizzou is still ranked.
And what we've talked about with A&M is if they can figure out everything else, their offensive and defensive lines can really take care of a lot of business. And
Connor Wegman looked really good.
It might be the year they're for real.
Yeah, they got some big games. They got some big games coming up as well. We had a huge game.
Dubs up, baby.
Throwing up the Dubs was the UW Huskies, who defeated Michigan in a national title rematch. Michigan finally inserted Jack Tuttle, who a lot of people said was their best passer, and their coaching staff said was the best passer the whole time, but it took them until like the 6th game of the season to play him, and then that was during that.
And then you pick up your second loss.
Yeah, and he had some momentum, but then the points came in bunches here. UW went up 14-0. Michigan went up 17-14, and then a 13-point fourth quarter from Washington that was punctuated by an interception on Michigan's final chance to take the lead. And the Huskies with a top 10 upset. Jed Fish's first big win there in Seattle as they win that national title rematch. And then in the Big Ten, former Pac-12 teams in the Big Ten, Southern Cal went on the road to Minnesota, lost 24-17. Spencer,
which is just awesome.
Lincoln Riley and their passing attack just looked lost.
They did, and Minnesota, a team that I don't think anyone expected to put up this kind of performance after seemingly showing that they weren't very good, just kind of owned USC.
Yeah, they played really hard in the trenches, 200 rushing yards on the day. PJ Fleck had him rolling and a gutsy call to go for it on 4th and goal at the end of the game, but he scored a touchdown, and the Trojans came up short. Miller Moss threw his second interception into it. And then finally, a game that was really kind of buried behind all this, number 22 Louisville dropped their 2nd game in a row against conference opponent Southern Methodist as the Mustangs moved to 5-1 on the year, putting up nearly 500 yards on the Louisville defense.
And something to note, their one loss is to a really good ranked BYU
Top
team.
15 BYU.
SMU is a team to watch, I think,
They're ranked now, I'm pretty sure.
They better be. I mean, Kevin Jennings, I think I'm saying that right. He was the backup at the start of the year, took the role over from Preston Stone, and it's just been amazing doing things with his arms and his legs, getting outside the pocket. He was just awesome to watch. And SMU, man, they're rolling. And I tell you what, it wouldn't surprise me if this team makes a run into the ACC title game.
Yeah, Clemson, Miami, and SMU all don't play each other this year. Those are the top 3 teams in the ACC right now. But a team that can throw a wrench in that is Pitt as well, who had a big win. But we're going to hit a quick break. We've got previews for next week in college football after this commercial.
And starting off with the biggest game of Week 7, Ohio State visits the Oregon Ducks in Eugene for a 2-3 matchup with the new AP ratings. Or the AP poll, excuse me. Of course, Ohio State coming in at number 2, Oregon at number 3. College Game Day's headed out to Eugene. This one's going to be awesome.
Yeah, College Game Day, no stranger to Eugene, but this is maybe the biggest game they've had there, at least with Game Day in attendance. The Ducks, of course, in first season in the Big Ten and taking on an Ohio State team. Now, this is really their first challenge. Oregon has faced Boise State, who's not terrible. Of course, I think
Boise State is quite good.
Terrible, actually. But these are 2 teams that haven't faced the greatest competition, but they've taken care of business. Ohio State beat Iowa 35-7 yesterday. Oregon on Friday night beat Michigan State 31-10. It's a 7:30 NBC airing And, Dylan Gabriel against Will Howard, 2 transfer portal quarterbacks who were very efficient. But really, I think what's shocking for a lot of people is just how good these defenses are.
Yeah, and I think it's really going to be a big stage to just see what these two teams are made of because, again, Oregon's played Boise State, Ohio State. I guess the best team they've played is probably Iowa, which is saying about as little as you can because Iowa doesn't have on offense for the 30th year in a row. So I think it's going to be a great matchup. I mean, it's about as good of a matchup as you can get in the regular season. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how these Buckeye receivers match up against the Oregon secondary because Jeremiah Smith, of course, and Emeka Egbuka have been excellent on the year. But Ohio State's defense, it's going to be a really good test to just see what they're made of because, again, they haven't really played an offense that can put up that many points.
Yeah, both teams very good at limiting opponents on third downs. Both teams really good at getting after the quarterback. Both teams also very good at protecting their quarterback. Where I think this one really comes down to it, which quarterback will make a mistake? Dylan Gabriel, his efficiency numbers have been really good, but he hasn't been putting up quite the numbers he was at Oklahoma. Will Howard, has done just enough. He hasn't really wowed anything. If Oregon's defense shuts down Quinshon Judkins and Travion Henderson, can they force Will Howard to beat him through the air? Will he be able to do that? But for Oregon, they're going to have to score touchdowns in the red zone. The one thing they've really struggled with this year, they're 94th in red zone scoring in the country. And they're really good at kind of getting in there, but, they haven't capitalized on those opportunities. Tez Johnson against the Ohio State secondary. Dylan Gabriel's probably going to need to find somebody else. But if they can get Jordan James in that running game going, Oregon, Dan Lanning likes to play smash mouth football. And Ohio State, the last time these two teams played, Oregon ran smash mouth football down their throat
with a big pick six
with C.J. Verdell. Yeah, that's Oregon's last one versus a top 5 opponent. Ohio State, the last time they went on the road and beat a top 5 team, they went down to Austin, Texas, and beat freshman Colt McCoy back in 2006. So it's been a while. Ryan Day 2-5 against top 5 teams. He needs this win.
He might be on the hot seat. He's one of those guys. If he can't get over the hump soon, the Buckeyes clearly they've got the talent, but they might just kick out the top man. Plug in a good coach and see what can happen. But another thing, I think Oregon really likes to involve short passing, horizontal movement against these lower-ranked teams because they're just superior athletically and up front. Ohio State's not a team you can just spam screen passes to or under routes. You're going to have to show some deeper concepts, and I think it's going to be a big statement game for Dylan Gabriel, his first one in the Ducks uniform.
Yeah, it should be a really great one. I'm really excited. And Gamecock fans, Jordan Birch is still in college. He leads Oregon with 5 sacks. But that's only the tip of the iceberg. It's the Red River rivalry is taking place in the SEC for the first time ever, an affront to all that we know is holy, but the newly crowned number 1 ranked Texas Longhorns. They'll look to remain undefeated against Oklahoma in this titular SEC matchup, Spencer. But, Oklahoma, both teams coming off of a bye week, but the Sooners, boy, they need this one.
They do. And, I made this graphic, JP, and it was really hard to find something nice to say about Oklahoma, especially on the offensive side of the ball, because really, they just aren't that good.
No, they're horrible.
They are not very good offensively. Defensively, I think they're good. I think they're on the field, though, all the time. But the only reason the Sooners beat the Auburn Tigers was because Peyton Thorne was playing quarterback, and he made just a horrible pass that Oklahoma was able to take back for 6. And this pass rush can get after it, but on the offensive side of the ball, they're really going to have to prove it that they can score points against Texas. I'm not sure if they're up for it, but it seems like Quinn Ewers is also going to be getting the start for the Longhorns, coming back off injury. So
yeah, that one could be bad. I mean, Oklahoma, the defense, like you said, we know what we have. It's a good defense. We'll see if Jackson Arnold or the true freshman Jackson
Hawkins, yep.
Yeah, for Oklahoma will start, but they're going to have to get off to a good start. And like we've seen in this rivalry a lot, that a team will go up big and then the other team comes right back. So we'll see which one of them does that, or if it's just one of those patented kind of stomps. But I'm really excited for this one. I think, it's always a really good game, very passionate crowd. So we'll kind of see if they can hold on. I think Texas, probably, I don't know how much they're favored by, but it wouldn't shock me if it was about like 10 points or whatnot, because
neutral game in Dallas, so the fans literally split half and half. It's the stadium always looks awesome whenever you see it, like from an aerial view. I don't know if it'll be as interesting as years past. Again, Oklahoma took it on a game-winning drive last year in the waning moments with Dylan Gabriel leading the Sooners to victory. But again, it's definitely going to be a good one in another SEC bout this week. Ole Miss and LSU will battle it out in the Bayou. South Carolina, very familiar with these two teams, of unfortunately 0-2, but showed up a lot better against one of them. But again, this one, it's going to be an interesting matchup. I mean, it's the 113th time these two teams are meeting. LSU leads the all-time series, but they've looked a lot better since falling week 1 to Southern Cal. Grant Nussmeier's putting up really good numbers, but this Ole Miss defense did show us that they're very solid. I think you have to credit them for stifling South Carolina. I think LSU's offense probably offers a lot more of a challenge, though.
It does. Garrett Nussmeier, really good so far. We saw him against Southern Cal and South Carolina putting up good performances in those big wins for LSU. They're coming off the bye week, and other than the Carolina game, this is the biggest early test for LSU after they lost to Southern Cal. But you get a home game. It was a great game a year ago, 55-49. Jackson Dart and Ole Miss are certainly capable of putting up those numbers again. Is LSU? I think that's the question. Or can LSU's defense step up and make a play? Ole Miss is capable of being punched in the mouth and dragged into these type of games that they lose. We saw Kentucky do it.
Exactly.
LSU, potentially better equipped to do it.
I think we projected the Gamecocks to kind of drag them into one of those games. But when you shoot yourself in
how
the
many
foot
fake
multiple
injuries will
times.
we see Ole Miss pull out?
I think some legislation is going to be put into play after this year because,
it's ridiculous.
First off, Jackson Dart, in a total idiot move last week, talked about how they were doing it. He literally said, we have a signal for it. They're gonna ban it next year. Like, if you want to, be a greasy team and do that, don't tell everybody
that's the
you're
Lane
doing
Kiffin
it.
way.
It's one of the more interesting takeaways from them just dominating South Carolina.
Yeah, and that's really going to do it, I think, for the college football coverage today. We'll be back with some MLB postseason news and a preview for your Carolina Hurricanes after this quick break.
The Carolina Hurricanes look to make the postseason once again with a new-look roster this year. JP, I think you're a much more devout Hurricanes fan than I am. I definitely watch the postseason, which is probably not the right thing to do with this team because regular season, these guys are warriors, but they seem to just haven't put it together in the postseason, but they lost a lot of key pieces this year.
Yeah, it's always just kind of like a myriad of disastrous microcosms that all come together to create one big destruction in the postseason.
That was the most JP sentence ever.
And
yeah.
it's always either, you're missing good chances, bad goaltending, bad defense, injuries. They can never seem to catch the break they need.
Or they'll lose in overtime.
Yeah, they lose.
Overtime all the time.
And overtime in playoff hockey is literally just a matter of bounces. And they for 6 straight years have come out on the other end of those bounces going home. Last year they lost in the second round in 6 games to their hated rival in the Metro Division, the New York Rangers. They fell down 3-0 in that series, nearly forced a Game 7, but alas, they became the 5th team in NHL history to reach 50 wins or more in 3 straight seasons. Every other team that has done that has won a Stanley Cup in that window. So we'll see if the Canes can add to that this year.
Well, JP, let me ask you, do you think this team has the bones of doing that this season?
I think so. Of course, they did lose Jake Gensel, who they traded for at the deadline, who was outstanding for them in a short amount of games.
Really surprising they didn't try to.
Well, they did. Him and his agent it ultimately came down to they just did not want. They didn't want to. They asked for something. Carolina gave it to them, and they're like, actually, we don't want to be here. So Carolina had to cut ties there. They also lost longtime winger Teuvo Teravainen, who is a big-time contributor. But other than that, it was a lot of kind of depth guys in the forward. Stefan Nason, who was really good last year, Evgeny Kuznetsov. Defenseman-wise, Brady Shea and Brett Pesce had been here for this whole run. So losing them is tough. But in the offseason, they added some guys that are really, I think, going to help. Some guys that really fit the Hurricane model. In the forward department, Jack Roslovich is a former New York Ranger who's a very physical winger. William Carrier with the Las Vegas Knights was really, really good as a sniper scorer, something Carolina has desperately needed
He
over the years.
won a cup with those Knights, correct?
Yeah, he did.
That's right.
And then, they brought in Shane Walker in the defenseman area, who's an offensive-oriented defenseman from the Colorado Avalanche. So they brought in winning players, as well as former Hurricane trade deadline acquisition, Ghost, Shane Gostisbehere, one of the best offensive power play quarterbacks in
Best
the
name
NHL.
ever.
One of the coolest names ever. So they added that. They also re-signed guys like Seth Jarvis, Martin Necas, Jack Drury, Jordan Martinook, Jalen Chatfield, and of course one of the best defensemen in the NHL, Jacob Slavin. So that on top of their core, they already have Sebastian Aho, Andrei Svechnikov, the goaltending tandem of Freddie Anderson and Pyotr Kochetkov. I think they definitely do have the bones. It's going to be an interesting year because the rest of the Metro and the rest of the Eastern Conference also got worse. And there's a lot of question marks. So the season started in Prague. They started in Prague this past week. But the Hurricanes don't start until Friday night in PNC at the newly named Lenovo Center in Raleigh against former Southeast Division rival, the Tampa Bay Lightning.
It should be a good one. Again, I think for this team, they've at least shown you that the regular season, not too big of a problem for the Hurricanes. No. It really all comes down to the postseason. So, of course, we'll keep you in check whenever that gets around. But it's going to be interesting to see this team develop.
It's a marathon, and the Hurricanes are one of the more consistent teams, so we'll see. But speaking of postseasons, the MLB postseason is in full swing, and here's everything you've missed so far, as well as a game we have going in progress. Spencer, what have the folks missed?
Yeah, so far, again, the Mets are at the Phillies right now. They won Game 1. JP, Game 2 started just a couple hours ago. Can you get us with a score update?
Yes, the New York Mets lead the Phillies 4-3, heading to the bottom of the 8th. It's going to be Trey Turner. Bryce Harper, and Nick Castellanos. Harper and Castellanos went back-to-back to tie the game at 3, but then Brandon Nimmo for the New York Mets hit a solo home run to right center to put the Mets back out on top. In the bottom of the 7th, actually, the Phillies had 2 on and whiffed on it. Oof. It'll be Edwin Diaz against that top 3, or maybe the 3 best players for the Phillies.
Going to be very interesting. Again, Nimmo and Vientos were the main guys to circle in Game 1 for the Mets. They've also done really well, both hitting home runs in Game 2. So far, they've been the main guys. Again, we've got another National League matchup later tonight at 8:03. The Padres at the Dodgers. The Dodgers took Game 1 7-5. A back-and-forth offensive battle, but for the Padres, you have to feel like that was a big chance for you. You got to throw your ace, Dylan Cease, who went 3 1/3, gave up 6 hits and 5 earned runs. The Dodgers, after Yamamoto left the game, no runs after he came out after the 3rd inning. So 6 innings of relief, giving up no runs. So again, the Padres, I think, had the starting pitcher advantage in this one due to the Dodgers' injuries, and yet they lose with their ace on the bump on the road. Maybe not looking so good for them. Moving to the AL, they have the day off today, but the Guardians have a 1-0 series lead against the Tigers. Again, Tanner Bybee was really good, but after 4 2/3 innings, the Guardians' bullpen allowed no hits the rest of the game through 4 1/3. They're locked down, one of the best we've seen since the 2015 Royals. And then speaking of those Royals, they're at the Yankees. The Yankees took Game 1 in a back-and-forth game. JP, tell us a little bit about that one.
Yeah, that was the first postseason game in MLB history to have 5 lead changes. Gleyber Torres, a noted postseason performer, had a great game. 2 walks along with a 2-run home run that put the Yankees on top early. Juan Soto was 3 for 5. Alex Verdugo
threw out a guy at home.
He did. He lasered Salvador Perez to keep the game tied. But it was Alex Verdugo, a much maligned player in the regular season, who came in the clutch with the winning hit in the 8th inning, sending Jazz Chisholm all the way from second. Aaron Judge, a tough performance. Alex Rodriguez got crucified for being a postseason dropper with the Yankees. But Judge's postseason OPS is nearly 100 points below what A-Rod's was before A-Rod had his nuclear 2009, where he single-handedly willed the Yankees to the World Series. But, these games were all really awesome. I think with Cease, the most interesting thing there, he hit his spots. The Dodgers just punished him. And so we'll see if Jack Flaherty, who was a starter with the Detroit Tigers, turned into a bullpen arm when he got traded to the Dodgers. Now he's back starting on the bump for them in Game 2, so we'll kind of see what happens
largely
there.
Because the Dodgers, have a ton of
injuries.
I almost short-circuited just completely. Their IL is just chock full of position players.
We have a full count in the bottom of the 8th. That's what this is. We're not just being
incredibly timely news.
Yeah.
But again, that's all we've got for you today. We'll be right back after a quick break with this week's Pick'ems to wrap up yet another episode of Ball Don't Lie.
Welcome back to BDL Pick'ems, and at the start of Week 5, a brutal weekend has brought my record down to 23-17.
He went 2-8.
Well, Spencer pulls ahead with a 27-13 record. It was a bad weekend to be J.P. Barry in multiple different ways, but we'll head through our Pick'ems here now. With the NFL action is tonight, a big-time helmet matchup, two old rivals, the Pittsburgh Steelers and the Dallas Cowboys. Spencer's, who do you got?
I'm going to take the Steelers just because the Cowboys have seemed a little one-dimensional, just trying to do too much through the air against the Steelers, one of the best defenses in the league at night at home. I think the Steelers get it done. What about you, my friend?
Yeah, the Cowboys just haven't super impressed this year, and I don't think it'll come on the road against that Steelers defense. I think Justin Fields does just enough, and the Steelers get the win. Then on Monday Night Football, it's the New Orleans Saints going on the road to Kansas City, and the Saints, they look like one of the hottest teams in the NFL. I think they've lost their last two. Spencer, who do you got?
I'm going to take the Saints in this one. The Chiefs are 4-0, and really, their defense, I think, is phenomenal, and the only reason they're 4-0 because offensively they have not looked like the team of past. And, every game has come down to the wire, sometimes involved a questionable call. I think the Saints go on the road and get it done after Mahomes destroyed Rashee Rice's knee.
He did do that.
So he took out his best receiver, very unfortunately. I mean, that was just sad to see because it looked really bad.
It did, but so did that car wreck. But, that was – I'm going to take the Saints. I think that, I think they go on the road and get a big win. They need it. And without Rice, I think that, the Saints defense is going to be able to really key in on some guys.
And
Travis Kelce has been MIA.
And I think the Chiefs are due for a loss. That's what I was, it seems like they've just squeaked by. I think the Saints will shut the door on them. Moving on to college football, we've got our very own South Carolina Gamecocks heading to Tuscaloosa. JP, are we both rolling with the Tide here?
Yeah, although Alabama should be ranked a lot lower, they'll still beat South Carolina.
Yeah, I think they will. I think we can both hope that South Carolina will at least look better. And honestly, better's okay. You can't expect to beat Alabama every year, but you got to show up like an SEC football team. Moving on to our game day matchup, number 2, Ohio State on the road to Eugene, number 3, Oregon. JP, who are you taking in this one?
It's going to be a tough game. I predict it to be very low scoring, two very good defenses and offenses that haven't quite hit their peak stride. Jeremiah Smith and Micah Egbuka are going to make some big plays for Ohio State through the air, but I think Jordan James is really going to be the difference maker for Oregon. I think he'll open up the offense for Dylan Gabriel, and I think the Ducks get it done at home.
I think this is going to be a fantastic game. I thought about going with the Ducks, but I'm going to go with the Bucks here. I think Ohio State's got a lot of speed on defense as well as big physical linebackers to try and slow down this Oregon running game, and I don't think if the Ducks can't get it going, I don't think they can turn one-dimensional in this game. I think Ohio State's big physical receivers could prove the difference point, so I'm going with the Buckeyes. Number 1, Texas on the road. I didn't say at. Excuse me. It's a neutral site matchup in Dallas against Oklahoma. But again, the Red River rivalry. Who you got?
I mean, Oklahoma is they're just terrible. I refuse to watch them. They're only ranked because they're in the SEC.
I'm really surprised why they are ranked. I mean, they should have lost to Auburn, but Auburn sold the game.
Auburn is horrible. I think Texas rolls.
Yeah,
Quinn Ewers comes back from injury and makes a statement.
Yeah, Texas rolls, but again, Auburn fans are posting, at least we won the coin toss on Twitter. That's about how their season's going, and Oklahoma just squeaked by against them. So I'm also going with the Horns. Ole Miss at LSU. JP, this one could get interesting.
It could. I initially was thinking Ole Miss continues to roll. I just can't stand them, and I can't live with myself if I pick them to win.
That's awesome.
So I'm flipping my switch, and I'm picking LSU to upset Ole Miss. I think it's just a tough place to play. It's a much more offensively inclined team. Although LSU has had some defensive injuries, their defense is still good. I don't know if Jackson Dart and company can get it done on the road. I'm going to pick the Bayou Bengals.
I was wondering where you were going with that. I was like, Tiger starts with T, but I'm also going to go with the Tigers at home. Night game, good environment. I think LSU's punch in the mouth was South Carolina, so I think they're going to bounce back and have a better into their season than it started. Moving on to an awesome ACC matchup. It's Cal at number 22 Pitt.
Yeah, Cal both sold and got sold really hard last night against Miami. They really should have won that one if it wasn't for themselves and dubious officiating towards the end. But
2 weeks in a row against the U.
Yeah, Miami getting some interesting help from spiritual guidances, I guess. But for Cal, bouncing back from that's going to be hard. Bouncing back from that across the country against a Pitt team that's 5-0 for the first time since 1991. Eli Holstein's one of the best quarterbacks in the ACC. I think the Pitt Panthers get it done.
I'm on the train that Pitt is kind of fraudulent. I think the Bears go in, and I think they should have a better record than they do. They should have been able They should have been able to close out against Miami.
Nathan Peterman.
Nathan Peterman.
Let's just start naming Pitt quarterbacks until you acquiesce. But
no, I mean, I think Cal gets it done just because Pitt's had too many games where they come behind at the end of the games and got it done. I'm going to have to switch. Penn State at USC, who you got so we stop talking about bad quarterbacks?
Southern Cal is just bad. And, although it's at the Coliseum, they really have not shown a feistiness at home under Lincoln Riley.
Don't show up.
I think Penn State's just going to go in there and just really kind of show them what Big Ten football is about. And they're just going to hammer it down their throat.
I was going to say Big Ten football for Penn State is 1950s football. So Katron Allen and Nick Singleton will get 30 carries apiece.
Drew Aller will throw 15 passes.
Yeah, and USC will just sit there and watch them score.
Speaking of 1950s football.
Yeah, I'm taking Penn State. Again, what he said. Stanford at number 11, Notre Dame. I'm taking the Irish in this one. I mean, I know who my co-host is. Go ahead, buddy.
Stanford is they're a bad team, but also they're a team Notre Dame has inexplicably struggled with recently. And after a nice bye week where literally everything went right for Notre Dame, and Michigan and Southern Cal lost, I think Marcus Freeman and the Irish are going to come out well composed at home and actually look good at home in all phases of the game. They won't cover the 23.5-point spread.
You're really practicing your affirmations over there.
Yeah, but no, I think that they continue to improve offensively. And Stanford's defense and their offensive line, other than running the ball, they can't throw it. So,
a Big 12 matchup here for our last pick'em of the day. Number 18, Kansas State on the road at Colorado at night.
Speaking of teams that can't throw a forward pass, the Kansas State Wildcats, unfortunately, I just don't think they'll need to on the road against Colorado. The Buffs' defense is still not very good. Avery Johnson, DJ Giddens, and Dylan Edwards are just going to be able to – they could go out there and run the flex bone and still win 9 or 10 games. I think they get it done on the road, although it might be close because Colorado does have athletes.
And I think Colorado's actually shown a lot that they've grown more as a team as of late, especially since last season. The defense, I think, has gotten much better. Especially as the season's progressed. It's kind of what won them some games to start this season. They only have one loss, I'm going to ride with the Buffs here just because I think they show us something, and those athletes might make some big-time plays. But that's going to do it for this episode of Ball Don't Lie. Be sure to follow us on Instagram, X, and TikTok at SGTV at USC.
To keep up with all of our content, be sure to also visit us online at sgtv@usc.com. For SGTV, I'm JP Barry.
And I'm Spencer Ball. From all of us here at SGTV, have a great week, Carolina.
Forever to thee.
You can't really see us on the bump shot.